sweating and seriously short of breath, the couple inelegantly expelled themselves into the damp, blustery night and were immediately seized by a thick, chilling fog outside the rear employee-only entrance of the Avenging Angle Club. The ill-disposed air enveloped them like the too-tight embrace from a cloying, cheaply perfumed aunt you barely loved and never really liked. Stumbling through the small, currently carless lot, unceremoniously awakening long unconscious empty beer bottles and comatose crushed cans. This discordant cacophonic symphony for post-industrial cerebral annihilation completed as soon as they set foot onto the gritty, blood-black sidewalk. The view ahead resembled an in-progress near-future urban catastrophe in the aftermath of an evacuation that had gone terribly wrong. She took a long final drag on a palliative cigarette, number 10 for the evening, then unconcernedly flicked it into a pool of oily, cold rainwater runoff, taking with it some traces of her strawberry-flavored, desperate lipstick, as it mixed with spent antifreeze, oil, urine, and a host of other colorful, sometimes scented industrial fluids. He inhaled the thick, damp, vapor-like air, coughed hard into his cold hands, and spied the image of a reliably shaking and drenched brown mongrel sitting up ahead on the cracked concrete staircase of a century-old red-bricked row house, number 1117. The cadaver of a recently deceased cigarette hung just barely from the hound's pointy-nosed accountant snout. Upon arriving at the crumbling arthritic steps, they looked down upon the wretched stray, who then said to no one really in particular, "I'm gonna shake this habit, but until I do, can you spare a light, or perhaps even a dupe or two?" Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it, says Hebrews 13:2. And rare metal-plated boot heels echoed throughout the cobblestone road that ran along the windswept river that cleaved the city into two halves like a metropolitan black dahlia. The dependable but somewhat predictable footfall clicks chimed the melody of a currently tumified river knocking venerable old boats into decrepit boulder docks. Floyd, still feeling no pain, she somehow effortlessly leapt up onto the low stone wall that runs along the river and skipped along the flat, rough, skillfully masoned surface, which provided a welcome syncopated variation to the percussive four-on-the-floor beat of his heels, still holding together a jackboot rhythm on the cobbled road below. He momentarily lost the cadence when a gust of intrusive wind lifted his mist-covered woolen, dark green military field cap off his head. He managed to grab it as it hovered like a saucer in front of his face, and then came to a slippery stop upon which a thin, carelessly striped grayish cat appeared from behind Ken's newsstand, holding a small, lidless, tragically scratched and dented silver flask. He took her now red leather-gloved hand as she jumped down from the wall, and they walked with a slightly hurried pace up to the near-tight Tabby, who then said to no one really in particular, "I'm gonna shake this habit. But until I do, could you buy me perhaps another drink or two?" Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it, says Hebrews 13:2. Seemingly oblivious to it, they continued to walk through a teary wet snow, now just 5 minutes or so away from the potentially unhealthy lot they parked in. The only considerate light in the vicinity was a dimly illuminated sidewalk sign in front of what should have been a condemned Methodist church. A few flickering bulbs remained barely alight, displaying old reddish-black cracked plastic letters on top of a jaundiced, translucent, pitted plastic screen. "Be ye fishers of men. You catch them, he will clean them," the sacrosanct signage decreed. Rolling sardonic eyes, she sauntered carefully around to the other side of the sign, looking perhaps for yet another pontifical lesson, only to find God Hose's outcome on the sickly lit repurposed display. No doubt articulated by educated junkie poet derelicts. This led to a much welcomed and needed giggle on her face. "Dog only knows what the original said," she drawled. Louis was still fumbling around on the other side of the sign from her, hand pressed deep inside the left pocket of his vintage black Bulgarian military field jacket, hoping against all reasonable hope for one final packet. Stretching elongated fingers downward, he managed to pinch a wax paper corner and slowly slide it up and out of his pocket. Feeling the rather thick contents between thumb and forefinger, he gazed upward with mollified eyes, and finally noticed a black rat pacing back and forth along the parish entrance, capriciously watching him. He called over to her, directing her attention to yet a third whiskered denizen of these dank, now numbingly cold, dark boulevards of debasement. Taking her hand again with his right hand, he tossed the waxed packet up and down in his left hand, and they ambled over to the fidgety rodent, who then said to no one really in particular, "I'm gonna shake this habit, but until I do, could you fix me up perhaps with another hit or two?" Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it, says Hebrews 13:2. they finally made it to the parking lot, their vehicle by now a solitary internal combustion igloo, nested under a flickering, underqualified lamplight. Looking skyward, it had finally dawned upon them that a foggy, misty rain had somehow, unbeknownst to them, been transformed into a steady, wet snow, which by now had long been engaged in surveilling their footfalls as they traversed the snow-cloaked but still embarrassingly crumbled asphalt surface. Miss Lady, she danced in front of the frosted hood of the car, directly under the sickly lamplight, and heedlessly yet correctly sequenced out the dance moves from earlier in the evening onto the thickening layers of vanilla milkshake snow, rapturously recalling the quite risque and obviously noticed fondling he provided on the dance floor. To her alone, she had hoped. After kissing her in and amongst her Juilliard Arctic dance steps, he walked over to the driver's side door, fumbling for his keys amongst a few coins, vape pen, Coke vial, and the even fewer tabs left over from the night. Upon finding the keys, he went to unlock the vehicle when, from out of the darkness, a rather imposing yet obviously oldish man materialized, holding a worn black leather bag in his equally black, gloved left hand, and something long, thin, and shiny, like polished steel, perhaps, in his right. Incredulously looking both protective and craven, he advanced to his partner, held her close to him, and uneasily asked of the elderly man if he required any assistance. Now, unlike the previous strange visitants from tonight, this one spoke directly to the couple when he tranquilly said, "I'm gonna shake this habit. But until I do, there's one or two things I need to take from you. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it," says Hebrews 13:2. However, be on your guard so that you are not carried away by the error of unprincipled men and fall from your own steadfastness, warns 2 Peter.